Okay, yeah, so let's get started. Welcome everyone for cloud computing and big data, and welcome to our online audience as well. Today, the topic is software as a service, and as the name suggests, it's really think about, so to speak, the end product, the software we're talking about. While in the last lecture, we talked more about the platform character for cloud developers, right? And of course, the software is built on top of that. And we will see that when we maybe review firstly shortly what we had the last time, when we talked largely about lots of different Lego bricks, right? And the idea was really you have them in many different colors and many different forms. In other words, you have a queuing service for tasks that has to be executed on computing. You have a billing service for swiping the credit card in your SaaS solution. And you put this as a PAAS module to your solution. And over basically this software development lifecycle of bringing in more Lego bricks in your application, you basically create a so-called SaaS experience based on PAAS building blocks, which are these Lego bricks. And we have seen this had many different positive effects. One of it is, of course, that this Google App Engine provides you with a very interesting environment to have the whole deployment, version control, coding on different platforms, all under control, which is, of course, a very interesting aspect. If you're a software developer right now, do it on a laptop, you have to think about Macs, you have to think about Unix environment, you have to think about Windows environment. And here, lots of things are already automated. But we have also seen, of course, with some of these applications, that's not the only benefit. The other benefit comes, of course, very, let's say, importantly through the scaling effect, right? And when you see with Philips, with the lightning that we have seen, this is something where they can never really know how many people switch on the light, switch off the light, work on this, in which load areas. So there's a bit unpredictable load, right? Of course, over years, they make some statistics, but suddenly there could be, let's say, some marketing impact from some campaign where suddenly many people buy it, and then the server would be stressed. If you're now a small startup like Philips, it is not as we just learned about, from Eindhoven, it's a big company, but if you're a small company and have a little server, right? How you deal with this load suddenly. So if you have this overnight, you have to go next day, get the physical server right, get the administration right, the maintenance. And then suddenly over Christmas, everybody's on vacation, nobody uses the light. Oh, and suddenly the load dropped and you have lots of empty servers, physical, standing in your cellar. And this is loss of investment. So in a way, it combines nicely the cloud with this dynamic character we had already as infrastructure as a service, with the idea of software and using software in a way which is a bit unpredictable already for peak times. And this automatic scaling of this is, of course, best explained when you think about, I told you the initial failure of Rovio, right? Having this kind of soccer game, which was not really working out. If they would have bought the server landscape like they have now for Angry Birds and would have this in the cellar for the soccer game, lots of investment lost. Now, on the other hand, Angry Birds from them was a success. Of course, they also didn't know that, right? So they started small and could nicely extend suddenly with this explosion of users. And that even landed at some point in time to a spin-off of basically Angry Birds. And now if you go to your iPhone, you will probably find 10 apps on Angry Birds, right? For all kind of certain areas. There's even movies these days. So it's a big franchise. But nobody could predict that this was going to happen. And of course, here having this scalable architecture just there means they could really focus on the game design. They could focus on the game itself. They didn't have to deal with all the IT issues. Oh, server 7 is broken down, so I cannot do, let's say, the level and cannot work on the level and the game design. I have to work on IT infrastructure because the server failed. All of that is gone with this cloud and with this, let's say, interesting environment. And then combined with the flexibility of more data and of the idea that perhaps sometimes you have not only one application outside, right? If you're a developer, I hope this is here taught in software engineering and in software development, you have different versions, right? You never get the versions that you're implementing onto the users. This is A/B testing. There are lots of testing certifications before you put something to the end user. So in the end, you have something like very different versions of one application, of one game to support in your development cycle, right? And you want to have a new feature of this Birds integrated. You don't do this in the production version. This keeps on, right? For the users, you do this in a kind of research version of the game to really experiment with this. In the end, we talk about different infrastructures for different versions of software, which is another added value. Then, of course, I could go on and talk to you about lots of benefits, but I thought the one which is kind of important and we will touch back on are this NoSQL data store. That means not only SQL, you can still access them with SQL, but they're made in a manner that basically SQL is not the driving paradigm. Here we talk about key value stores, which is another name for this NoSQL. You see, basically those are oriented towards data, which is extremely unhomogeneous. SQL databases from Oracle still have their place to be. For structured data, everything is always the same. And it will be always, then these databases are just good in that. But if it starts with information like we have often in the web, where people in Facebook sometimes give their phone number, their location, first names, others just give their email address, and you have just an ID somewhere, you have very unhomogeneous information, right? And this is where just these NoSQL databases are good in. And you have seen the big jungle of them from Cassandra to HBase. They all have their unique selling proposition, and we will look into this a little bit. The idea is, of course, here to be very flexible, like the bucket store we have seen in S3, just put the information in. Of course, there's some downsides on it. When you see compared to normal schema-based ones, you basically have no precise schema. You have a key value pair and data. So you cannot really work with a schema to do, for instance, consistency checks anymore. So that doesn't make sense. You didn't fill the first name, and you don't really quickly can see that here. So because you have not a concrete schema that says this is a field that is required all the time, like the first name, for instance. So you miss some consistency requirement, which could lead sometimes to, let's say, databases which are not perfectly filled. But the upside is really they're immensely fast, right, compared to normal SQL databases. And yeah, basically then we continue with different PAAS services elements, where I also here picked one little piece. You have seen there are many different ones for image recognition, for whatever problem we have. Here in machine learning, one problem we often have is this natural language processing in one way or another. You want to create a chatbot, you want to create a small hotline, which basically asks questions before you come to a real hotline, worker. You have, let's say, a GUI that you want to translate in, let's say, 10 languages in Europe. So all of these components are given to you, right, on this kind of PAAS level to create your SaaS experience. And then you have a multi-language layout. So in a way, I'm saying, and of course, Iceland is a bit, let's say, out of this, because it, as we discussed also, Google Translate and all these services have a problem of corpora to learn well. But for Italian and for, let's say, other Spanish, other countries, this works really well. And yeah, so this is just two examples of these PAAS building blocks. And if you look in real clouds today, you will find over hundreds of them, more and more getting specialized. So today, however, we want to focus more on SaaS solutions. So we go again one level up and want to understand what is now the benefit of using these SaaS models. Admittedly, it's, let's say, less technical. I show you many different websites on many different model ideas. But still, of course, think about that underneath the IAAS, so the infrastructure and the platform is always part of it. Just that you see also that the software, how we distribute that, actually has changed with the way of cloud computing, right? So we see this a lot in Netflix, for example, with online streaming. Nobody goes probably anymore downtown and buys a DVD of a new movie. You go to Netflix, you go to Amazon, you go wherever your streaming server is. Also, think about there were times where people had software stores in downtown, right? You go to a software store, you get a disk with a game, or there was even Windows on it at some point in time. Then the market switched to CDs, then DVDs and Blu-ray. And now basically cloud computing has made it available that basically you have all different models of how you distribute software. And this is mostly online today, maybe in some exceptions still offline, but then maybe more for marketing purposes, as really it would make sense. And this opens different landscapes, because in previous times, if you have a very niche market, right, to go downtown and to convince a seller to spend their valuable place in the shop for your little software, which maybe has 3 customers per year, this is not possible. In the cloud, you have the world market at hand. You don't have a location problem. So in this, you can open up niche markets significantly, which was not previously possible in software. So lots of business with SaaS, which actually made it available to the communities with different licensing pricing models. I mean, you know that basically subscribing to Netflix, or some of you maybe use a customer relationship management, someone using CRM, Zoho, Freshworks or something. Not really, okay. And there are different models we will talk about. And the second, basically, are advanced SaaS topics. Also here, I could talk, of course, about the big landscape. I picked, again, some of you with some having, added value, where I believe to show you a bit the heterogeneity of the approaches. One was basically this business sellers, the business cases where you can have cross-selling a lot, right? Once you are in the customer relation management, then you're very close to project management. So you top up, you swipe your credit card again, you have a new module which suddenly has not only customer relationship management, but also project management. But it's still Zoho. Basically, you can integrate your contacts from there. So you're more likely to do this instead of going to another cloud and then basically do the same thing again. So all of these have hidden assets. And here you see also some engineering focus in some of the clouds, like basically Uber Cloud is a good example for this, that have just very specific packages for engineers already provided, which would be in previous times unthinkable, right? That you go downtown Reykjavik in a software store and get this very specific package for a very small, tiny community that does, for instance, aircraft engineering here. It might be just 5 people that need this. So in other words, again, a good example. Then we go, let's say, mainstream, and just to understand the contrast to, let's say, niche markets like law, legal aspects, right? Also there, it would be unthinkable that you go downtown for contract management solutions in software. So all that changed. Now you have lots of plethora of them in the internet. At the end, I thought I'd bring you a little bit of the perspective of the academic sector. It's called the European Open Science Cloud. That is something what academics can use for exchange data, and are all different SaaS, let's say, examples, which are very good. They're free for researcher. And finally, we add up, let's say, a little bit with the SaaS disadvantages. Of course, as a university, you always have to balance, right? What is good, what is bad, being neutral or a honest broker, so to speak, of saying also, this has also some disadvantages. And one big one is someone I already talked to you, vendor login, data login. This always is something which we have to discuss. Good. Let's go and understand these concepts. The initial part of this would be very, let's say, things you already know. The infrastructure we discussed, basically lecture 8, the platform basically now in lecture 9. And in a sense, we just build on all of these different components, bring them together to some form of an application, whatever that might be, right? And of course, it should run hopefully in many different devices. That is a very big topic today, from desktop computers to laptops to handheld devices, tablets. So this is, of course, a big challenge today, motivating also the cloud when you think about of software engineering, where the Google App Engine, for instance, help you a lot to create different SaaS solutions very quickly on top of it. So we have these different layers also discussed. Now we extend essentially the part of saying we have this infrastructure. We added actually the cloud developer perspective of having many different components and Lego bricks available for us. Now what we just add is basically a hosted application in different version on top of these landscapes in order to make it to the SaaS experience, where then, of course, the users of these level don't see anything anymore from this, right? You will see the most SaaS experiences are in a way done that this is all, let's say, more or less, basically every component PAAS and IAAS is not really visible to the customer. And you don't want to know. If you're a lawyer and use a legal software as a service system, you don't care about the IT infrastructure. You want to focus on your legal aspect, why you do contract management in the cloud or something. So, and with this, I also talked about you this kind of multi-tenant architecture benefits. The traditional software, as we have done it when I was, say, a bit younger, I still did this new game, went to downtown, got the game, and then went home, right? So this is unthinkable today. This is interesting because it was, in a sense, looking back, not so long times. And now we have a very wide area of different versions at the same time in the internet customized ways. You can extend your own basically worlds there. And this is, of course, something which really the cloud has driven forward. Without the cloud and this elastic behavior, it would be not possible. Of course, the internet, the network connectivity, that's all contributed, right? That every household has now fiber and things like that. And of course, the underlying architecture is something what you already know. The key idea with this is virtualization again in clouds, having different application hosted somewhere. And of course, here sometimes you have this different versions of the same application as beta release or so for testing. But essentially, we basically go back to lecture 4 and understand why that is so flexible and possible, because you have the power of virtualization, where you put all your different PAAS components in. And then the physical infrastructure basically glows then via these cloud data centers that we discussed in lecture 4. And this was the idea of this kind of horizontal scaling, where of course now you basically can always grow with the load, no matter what application or virtual solution you basically have. I think by now that is very clear. And one example, which is, for instance, here is this kind of Zoho, if you want to look it up. It has hell a lot of software. It is actually from customer relationship management to project management, contact manager, essentially everything you need for, lots of companies, until even an email client. And all of these different solutions are there. Of course, when they do it, they have always a production version. They have it in their portal that they sell. When you swipe your credit card, you get another module. But of course, they're for very good, let's say, friendly users. I'm also part of Zoho. Basically, I have one of the versions. You sometimes get contacted, don't you want to test this particular module, right? So the friendly long-term customers, they ask if they can have a byproduct basically tested. And this is how it works, right? You get another server and basically use Zoho as if it would be a production ready, but you test the new features. And this is, let's say, really used hell a lot by those people to experiment with new, let's say, experience before they even see basically and roll it out to the bigger market. And of course, this is just one example. If you go now to many different areas in all of these SaaS solutions, they have all the unique selling propositions. Here's one I pick out, customer relation management. You will see soon why, because this is, of course, a very lucrative market for companies. There are actually two very big markets. The other one is enterprise resource planning in the internet, where basically enterprises have everything from business processes, hiring, until basically purchases, shipping, transport. Everything is inside here. By CRM, it's more really keeping the customer, having automated analytics, basically about customers, crawlers of social media inside. With one click, you see everything about a person, right? So basically you see how much Facebook posts, where, what. You can identify a person with one click, essentially, if the profile is, of course, public and so on. And this is an interesting, let's say, market segment. Of course, think about a HR division of a company when they want to hire people. I don't say that they necessarily do this and are allowed to do this, but it's possible to check, what people and what history maybe other business partners or other companies have. And so this is something which is incredibly in terms of functionality. So we look into this, and the idea is really also that it's highly specialized on this and an unbelievable lucrative market. So we talk about 3.8 billion just in 1 year. And since then, it's basically a continuous growth of these different solutions. And in a way, it basically pulls down together everything you had with one client. Let it be verbal communication on telcos, it can log all of those automatically, up to emails, internet, social media activities. And then you basically are classified, use machine learning, put these people into different boxes, you analyze them, and then you basically have different elements where you, of course, now think, okay, this person is ready to get, a certain product selling. Apparently it has problems in this and that, or it was, let's say, doing lots of work with marketing and has looked at some of the ads from us. So let's activate the marketing to get more marketing to this person. So essentially a really interesting product portfolio that you have. And this is just one module, right? And of course, for this as a company, to understand the revenue stream of one customer would be very important. Just to give you another example, which is a very strong system as well, not to be biased with the Zoho that I use, for instance. Freshworks is another one where essentially you can see you have a virtual person, and whatever was done with that person, this is really live from the pictures, so it's not just a game. You see when this guy was called, what interactions and emails it was, the score of the customer, how it fits, to my campaigns of the products. Then all of these is also really much fueled with machine learning elements. So when you look into this, you will see an intelligent assistant. So it's called Freddy AI, which analyzes then all the data that is available about this person. So in this way, be careful what you post on the internet sometimes. Today, there are lots of public tools available which make it very simple for people to find out everything about a person, right? And it's done. It's really done by these tools. So in this sense, the security components are really important also to consider. Of course, here in your small scale view in the room here, I'm sorry for that. It comes not very clear. You see here statistics of spying. You see how often he was interacting with some other customer. You see different scores and lead scores. That means this is a guy we probably should chase. He will buy. We know that on his behavior. And then you get lower lead scores and you left him behind, or you put priorities on these certain people. And it's used incredibly often by lots of companies, Gartner and many others. And they all have, of course, the idea of, looking at social media and looking on the profiles, feeds to understand more about the person, more about the customer. Of course, this is dependent on your security settings, right? So that's why here goes the advice. Think about your security settings all the time. Chances are, if you're hired, you're a little bit checked by these tools. They probably never will tell you that, and maybe are not allowed to tell you even that. But there are tools out there that actually can do this very, very quickly. And it's hard to prove also that they checked you out. Right, and of course, then when we think about the idea of this modern software delivery model, we said this already. We see a bit here, the kind of quota or the kind of subscription details that you had. You had basically one user and one license. Of course, now when you do it in a company, you may be interested of just having 10 users. And of course, this is mostly always working. You have, instead of one user, 10, and then you have some interesting, let's say, contract that you get an upgrade of user. That's one way of doing it. And of course, then the next software is just maybe next to it. You see here, sales forecast done smarter with AI. When you are already in the CRM system, you get this marketing. With one click, you can say, I activate this AI package in my cloud to have more smarter sales. And of course, I swipe the credit card for it, but my credit card is already inside. So I just click on it and suddenly I pay 50 euros more per month. But of course, I get all the insights on more smarter AI problems and solutions. And by doing this, I mean, these modules are just there in the internet. You don't have to go downtown anymore and build the add-on package, things like that. Or for people that in former times maybe had played, Warcraft, Starcraft, and have the add-ons to these games or the mods and so on, go downtown and get it. Here it's just always one click also for games, not also only for the business environment. Again, also think about nobody has really an upfront investment. Many of these softwares are just there in the cloud, essentially saying you could do a complete CRM just with this mobile phone, right? You don't even need a laptop anymore. So, and no big servers anymore that need to scale with your customers. That's all in the cloud, and basically you can check there. And especially these days, I think we see a changing world with this powerful AI capabilities. So this is, of course, something to always think about, that today AI is on vogue in these tools. Wasn't so in 10 years ago. I think deep learning and the hype around it has really helped these tools to integrate more sales again. And when you compare them a little bit, of course, you have different, let's say, administration elements here. Instead of just basically operate your own cloud and looking on these different service level agreements where SLAs are, you have to basically just don't think about anymore of developing and deploying this. You essentially have to use a cloud there. And this is, of course, very nice. And all of them have, of course, their level, different ideas of how you deal with them. And all of them give you the service level agreements. In other words, you always can count on the infrastructure. You always can count on it, right? If you buy, if you create software and it's your own server and it fails, there's no one that you can make liable. It's maybe your own guy, the IT guy that you can, kick, but it doesn't help. Maybe then he leaves you even. So in the end, here you get something where they promise you 99.9 availability. And if you have your customer data inside, looking at sales, and so this is much more for a company important than maybe looking at the IT infrastructure. The downside is, of course, these really cost a lot, right? These services in SaaS, you will see some examples in this sense. When you here have the kind of idea how you now, of course, thinking about also traditional costs, you went downtown, had a package price, go back. There was no step-by-step. Now, what happened in the SaaS licensing world is now you have different versions, right? You start with a very, let's say, low-level package for 29, but then you have just a reduced feature set. You go more, have more features, right? And go on and go on. They all work like that, right? More or less, sometimes people do freemium where you don't pay anything. It's free of cost. But if you want more, then you suddenly pay. Here you see one freemium model here. Free when you start at the beginning, but you have almost nothing in terms of features. If you want to have the standard features, the professional enterprise, and of course, then maybe for a big company with 1,000 users, you have the big ticket, but then get, lots of flexibility, 24 hours, helper service for your whole stuff. So you see, it's not really technical today. I'm talking much more about distribution of software, licensing model, because we're on this playing field on software as a service. Some of you know also subscription fees like Netflix, right? So if like $9 or so a month and so on. But of course, the point is you probably also subscribe to Amazon, you subscribe to all others, Apple TV and so on. And then of course it accumulates also in cost. And here, this is a freemium model I already discussed, right? To get started, you can try this. It's 15 days of free. And of course, then you have your credit card inside somewhere. And after this 15 days, you even don't think about it anymore, right? So it starts automatically charging usually. So in a way, it's a way of hooking the users. I told you so already in the AWS services, for instance, to jump on board. Once you are on board, and have maybe your first 20 or 30 contacts in, chances are you just stay there because you don't want to redo the whole thing in another cloud. You want to test. So all in all, this contributes to this starting to look at also on the bad side, right? So of course, for us, it's much more easier to be hooked. It's much more easier to say, click, click, and then I'm suddenly subscribing to more and more things. So what I'm saying is usually I would recommend to make an Excel sheet table or something where you monitor all your pricing. Right? If you have $3.99 on this Apple device, $5.99 on Netflix, if you have this and this, I mean, I'm the wrong one to give you financial advice. I'm not a millionaire yet, but basically that is something really take care of this. It's getting better and better with this. They hook you with everything, and then suddenly it starts charging and you forget actually anything about it. And suddenly you have, instead of just $5.99, you have maybe $199 per month because of some interesting accumulation from all these different services. Good. So you see, it really is part of our life today. So I think everybody from us uses intensively these SaaS models. And this is, of course, a big success for this cloud. It expands more and more also into different regions. If I say 10 years ago, the world of machine learning and clouds was really not there. I was hacking with my students on HPC machines. We're using scikit-learn. We're using even R, right? A very old language for doing things. So that you do this just in a cloud with every version and every CRAN package. This was unthinkable at that time. So now everything is basically automated and you have lots of possibilities. One I wanted to bring to you is basically this Amazon Sagemaker. So if you look at this, it looks like a integrated development environment that you know from Eclipse, maybe for Java or C++ or IntelliJ, JBuilder, whatever you use. Essentially, that's the same thing, but for machine learning code. Hence, it is quite nice. It has always visual, impacts. You see directly all the plots. You don't have to do, PyPlot and then get your validation accuracy and testing accuracy, see if they are going different. So here, they really abstract away almost everything. Also, what I told you when we were on AWS on the virtualization layer with the AMI, right, with all the different packages in, with one virtual machine you can actually pick there. You still have to search what actually resource you use. You still have to search what AMI image, in which basically different versions. Here, everything is nicely abstracted away, but of course, it costs you. And here is also a nice example, by the way, of the freemium model, because you get Sagemaker for free, but of course, it starts charging after so and so many hours use. So once you're inside this, I'm again sorry here for the internal audience that this is a little bit small maybe, but I think you get the points. The code is here. Then you have your different runs with different parameters that give you different accuracies over the time. You directly can monitor this. Here's again the run of validation accuracy going down or basically going up again. So basically overfitting starts, abort the model, and things like that. So it's really an interesting suite again of different modules that the Sagemaker Studio as an integrated development environment gives you. I just pick here two of them as an example, where you can basically do step-by-step machine learning, and everything you do is so monitored and statistically done that you of course get better modeling very fast, especially because many of those in the experiments, they can keep track of versions. You probably noticed that maybe in Anna's course or so. You probably have another Python script, that change things, another Python script. You end up as a normal machine learning modeler with 20 or 30 or 40 Python scripts in parallel, right? And, you know, in a way, our assignment 2 is the same with different, you know, parameters in the, you know, kind of, you know, RMS prop and SGD. And here you do these changes, and this versioning of these changes keeps track. And you can always go back and say, the RMS prop was this, and can, you know, switch that side by side and see SGD was this, RMS prop was this. And all this version management control alone is already, of course, very strong in this. Left alone, of course, what you already know from previous lectures, Amazon is underneath, so scalable, needing GPUs, powerful infrastructure, storage, all no problem. It nicely connects to all the different people, actually all the different Lego bricks we really have seen before. Of course, here goes the downside on it. If you want to use it properly, let's say how Rocco, you know, and we're using ResNet 50, you have seen we're using 128 GPUs in parallel to actually deal with this model complexity and to have good accuracies in cutting edge models. It's completely different from MNIST, right? So basically, this is something where suddenly we train for many, many different hours. And if you want to have one with lots of memory, let's say a CPU underneath, what the Sagemaker is then using to make good performance, it's $28 per hour, right? And if you remember, Rocco told you that some of these models take usually, if you just take one of those, many, many, many hours, and we need 128 of them for many, many hours. So it, of course, comes again, the pricing of the infrastructure, combined now also with the software as a service. They give you some hot pots pricing. You say Sagemaker global GPU price reductions, of course, right? In the beginning, once you have used this tool, you actually like it very much because it's so nice. It's a perfect SaaS solution in a way. But once you're inside, then suddenly all of these free tiers start to getting actually into some budget. And you will see when you do cutting edge deep learning, then it's getting really, really expensive. Hence for us, as in the academic world, that would be unthinkable, right? You have seen Rocco's last slide. We are often in the millions and billions of computing that we actually want to use. And we could never afford this in the AWS infrastructure. Good, at the end, I gave you a little bit an interesting connection back here to this Salesforce. It's another, let's say, SaaS solution, which is very much known. Just that you know a little bit what else you can do with it. So we have a short video on this, but you can understand it's going on to almost all websites these days with these functionalities.
Today's new normal demands a new way to work. Work.com, built on Salesforce Customer 360, can help your business adapt to new needs and build trust with the suite of applications, best practice resources, and services. Now HR, IT, operations, and other business leaders focused on workplace resilience can leverage Work.com to help build that resilience and trust for today and be ready for whatever tomorrow brings. You can understand your organization's readiness to operate safely and how to support your employees' needs as they work from anywhere. With the Workplace Command Center, you can gain access to an integrated view of workforce wellness and readiness data for better visibility and use tools to take action across workplace locations. You can learn how employees are doing whether they're working from home or in the office. Organizations can use Wellness Check to send wellness surveys to employees and help identify needs, understand employee satisfaction, and help the business operate safely. That wellness data can be acted on, for example, to make scheduling adjustments if an employee isn't feeling well. And if an issue or health risk is reported by an employee, you can act quickly. With manual contact tracing, you can track health-related interactions. To help everyone stay safe, businesses can also offer employees access to services and tools that promote happy, informed, and productive employees. You can use push notifications to notify employees when there are new tools available, device upgrades, or security policies. And you can use chatbots to more quickly connect employees with important information. Employee activity can trigger the creation of new service tickets, which IT can view and collaborate on to help improve productivity. With Work.com, employees can also access a central workspace for information, support, apps, and workflows from anywhere. Employees can get self-service assistance and chat to answer questions quickly, so they can go about their day and stay productive. And employees can learn new skills and get up to speed on company policies and new ways to work with fun, gamified learning experiences built on My Trailhead, the Salesforce learning platform. When you're ready to reconnect and build trust with customers, you have what you need for success. With broadcast messaging, it's easier to share information through preferred channels like SMS. You can use AI-powered chatbots to help answer customers' questions and connect with them faster. Businesses can share important information easier with trust cards. Here, customers can learn how you are protecting employee and customer safety, which can help your customers feel safe and confident. When customers want to visit your workplace, queue management can help them join a virtual line from anywhere so they can avoid crowds. And working together, you can use queue management and broadcast messaging to let customers know when they're next in line. And just like that, Work.com can help you work in today's new normal and be ready for whatever tomorrow brings.
All right. Okay. Just a short disclaimer again that I'm not paid, of course, by Salesforce, but I think it would to allude with this a little bit into the next lecture. You know, alarm bells. We have really a problem here of constant surveillance of us, right? Also in Germany, that's a big debate right now, how much actually our click analysis in the centers can be analyzed, right? They will look how long we were on Facebook, so we didn't work at work times. So all of these are questions which are now very much debated also in the legal matters. Luckily, there's a framework for us that protects us. I will talk about this in the second part about GDPR and so on. But still, there's some loopholes I want to inform about. So it's also an important lecture in this regard, you know, the legal and the data protection rights. But this is something for the second part of the lecture. We break here for 10 minutes.